we're like, if you live where we are, because this is our pride too.
But I think it's just Pride weekend all over the country because it's like Pride in San Francisco and Oakland today too, and
okay,
yeah.
My city does it the first weekend of the month, and I'm like, I'm never ready. I'm never ready the first weekend of Pride, and it's always the worst timing. So I think I would love if it was at the end because it would give me time to prepare to get ready for Pride.
Yeah,
especially going into 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, fuck the 4th of July, obviously, but like
people are doing things around that time.
Right. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, we're spacing out. We are live. What's up, y'all?
Yay!
So this is going to be an incredible, fun, fantastic panel on Magic and Mayhem for Q Pop Fest, and we're going to be talking about queer, brown, fantastical things with these amazing authors. So if you would allow, what we would like to do is have each of y'all introduce yourselves. Yours truly is Jessie. We use y'all pronouns. We will be moderating this panel. And towards the end, we are going to be holding space for those of you who have questions for these incredible authors. So feel free to get your wheels turning. If you know if there's something you want to ask, don't be shy. So if we could go, let's have a roundtable moment. Let's start with Jessica, if we can. We would love it if you would introduce yourself or say anything that you would like to.
Okay. First, my internet is not the greatest. So if you can't hear me at any point, just let me know. But I'm Jessica. I write YA horror and middle grade contemporaries. And also I have pivoted to YA romance because I just do whatever I want. So my book that's out now is Bad Witch Burning. And I have Monstrance coming out in September. And those are both YA horror. And then my middle grades are under Jazz Taylor, Meow or Never, and Starting from Scratch. And all of my characters are queer. Just if I don't say that, it's just I'm telling you as the author, they are all queer. So very excited to be on this chat.
We love the canonically queer period. Like, we're obsessed.
Yes.
We're obsessed. Maggie, would you do us the honor of going next?
Yeah. Like Jessica, I also do whatever I want. And so I've written books like The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, which is high fantasy, and The Siren, the Song, and the Spy, its sequel that comes out this fall, and Squad, which is a graphic novel about queer girl werewolves. And also, like Jessica, all my characters are always queer, unless it's that one picture book I wrote about my grandparents, and I was unfortunately shackled by their actual real-life romance.
All right. Am I next? I think I am. Yes.
Yes.
I know how a clock works. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashia Monet. I am a young adult author of both horror and urban and contemporary fantasy. The book that you can find from me is The Black Veins, which came out in 2019. And if you see a different version of this cover, don't panic. This is the first anniversary edition with illustrations by Aislinn Brophy. And you can find like another version. Don't be scared. It's the same book. I also have a short story featured in the upcoming Black horror anthology, All These Sunken Souls, which comes out this fall, which I'm very excited about. I also do a variety of adult gothic horror. And again, like you guys said, all my stuff is queer. Even if I forget to mention that it is, just assume that everybody is gay all the time with everything I write.
All right. I'm assuming I'm next.
Yes,
I am. I am Terry J. Benton-Walker. I am the author of Blood Debts. It's a young adult contemporary fantasy out now. It came out in April from Tortine. I am also the author of the middle grade contemporary fantasy Alex Wise versus the End of the World. I don't have a show and tell for that one because I gave away my last arc to a kid at the Bronx Book Festival the other weekend, so I'm sorry. And I am also the editor of the young adult horror anthology, The White Guy Dies First, which is coming out next summer from Tortine.
Beautiful. Last and not least.
Hi, I'm Ashlyn. I'm the author of How to Succeed in Witchcraft. I write fantasy, honestly. I want to be like y'all and do it all, but I just love magic. And that came out last September. Yeah.
Oh, just stunned into silence. Y'all are so cool. So we want to get started. Let's keep it simple. Why urban and or contemporary fantasy? And then whoever wants to start totally. Just
Well, I can start.
yeah.
For me, I think it goes more so by the story that I want to tell versus like my brand, because I write high fantasy as well. But so specifically for Blood Debts, that was always a story that was set in a contemporary world. The magic system, well, part of the magic system is inspired by voodoo. So of course, like it has to be set in contemporary New Orleans, right? Which is like, even like in the real world, it's such a magical city. So that's why I chose contemporary fantasy for Blood Debts.
I can go next. Yeah. I love fantasy that has just roots in the real world, partially because I want to deal with real world issues in the real world rather than I think in like high fantasies, a lot of times you end up dealing with real world issues that we encounter in our world, but in like you have to do it through metaphor or by translating those issues to a new context and trying to show your reader something new by looking at it through that lens. But I just enjoy being able to be like, it's racism, you know what racism is, and not having to like make up fantasy racism. Also, I think it's really fun to be able to imagine our world as something more magical, and to be able to sort of pretend that if you just like looked hard enough in our world, you would be able to find like witches, or you'd be able to find, if you just knew where to look, there would be werewolves or whatever cool fantasy thing you're thinking about. So that's, I think, part of what also been part of the draw for me when I've been wanting to write it.
I agree with you so much. I think for me, I am a bit of a drama queen. I love melodrama in my work. I love really big emotions. I love really heartbreaking scenes. I love really pushing the envelope of feeling. And I think contemporary fantasy is a great way to explore magic through like metaphor, because I think that there's a lot of magic even in our everyday life today. Like I love reading contemporary fiction that doesn't have any fantastical elements. I don't think I could ever write it because I'm not talented enough to make real life interesting, but I love reading it. And I love seeing how those authors manage to take the mundane and make it interesting. And my way of doing that is with contemporary fantasy, where you can take things that people understand, things like, for example, a forest in our world is magical. And for me, when I was writing Black Veins, I decided to translate that by making a forest that bends time and space. And you can walk through it in New York and end up in California when you leave it. And so for me, contemporary fantasy gives me a lot of space to look at things that I do find magical and interesting in the everyday and sort of be like, what is the most dramatic way that I could push this and make it even more fantastical and even more spectacular? So I love contemporary fantasy because it lets me be the melodramatic queen that I am. And that's my favorite thing to do.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everyone. For me, I write horror, so I think there's something really special about horror, which is that some things are horrible, like monsters or like vampires or things like that. But then there's also just like the horror of being poor in Alabama and you have no support and you live in a house that is abusive and you can't escape that. And so I love putting real life horror against fantasy horror because I feel like it drives home the message even more. Like, look at this. This is terrible. And then but it could easily happen to you. And so that's why I prefer using a real world setting, because I feel like it punches the message home a little harder.
I have to agree what you say about horror. And that was like exactly how I felt. Squad is set where I went to high school. The main character looks suspiciously like me. And I had wanted to write about kind of like the awful rape culture that I was raised as a part of in a way. And I'd been trying like basically since I graduated high school to like find a way to talk about this. And it was always like very after school special, or like the tone was always wrong. And I felt like once I switched to horror and was like, okay, but they're werewolves. I had this freedom to show high school, I felt like more accurately in some ways, like as stupid and absurd, but also how like frightening and like bodily it all was. And I loved that horror gave me that opportunity.
Honestly, we can't remember who said it, but someone once said that horror is a safe space to experience the traumatizing and walk away from it. And there's something
Yes.
very empowering about being able to decide when and how to engage with things that could potentially destroy you. And that is a big part of the reason why we are so obsessed with fantasy horror, especially that is racialized or through a queer lens, because it speaks to, as Jessica was saying, the horrors of also just being poor. And sometimes, oftentimes, and this we would argue is applicable to BIPOC, queer, and urban contemporary fantasies as well. There's like this hierarchy that exists where, okay, well, if this fantasy or this horror is racialized and it's not all about dragons per se, for example, then it's less of a horror book. It's less of a fantasy book because there's too much of the real world. But in our opinion, that is a way to de-center the author and the experiences of the readers who are there to connect with that work. So all of that to say, we really, really like hearing y'all talk about why urban contemporary fantasy and horror just was so affirming. So thank you for sharing all of your perspectives. So the next question that we wanted to ask, we kind of just talked about. It was, do you feel that urban and contemporary fantasy, and in Jessica's case, horror, especially QT BIPOC fantasy, is stigmatized and viewed as less desirable than other forms of fantastical storytelling? And if so, why or why not? Let's start with Jessica.
Okay. I definitely think it is. Okay, let me gather my thoughts. I think that I've definitely seen people respond to me differently than my other peers, if that makes sense. So I just got like a Kirkus review for Monstrous, and then they made a point to say, "Oh, this is a racial horror." It's not even really a horror; it's like a thriller, and I'm like, would you have said that if I were white? You know, like, so like, of course, race plays into my main character's viewpoint because she is Black in a small town in Alabama, and a bunch of white people sacrificed her to a giant snake. Like, of course, it's gonna come up, but because because she is a Black teen, then review sites made sure to point that out and to lessen the impact, at least in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think that it is a thing. I'm working very hard to ignore that and just keep doing what I'm doing. And the people who get it, they get it. The people who don't, y'all can just read about the giant snake and enjoy. So, it is what it is. Like, we have to do what we can to rise above it, I think.
I think I would add that, like, unfortunately, it is a bit of a double-edged sword as well, because when you are a BIPOC creator, people tend to come to your work with one of two expectations, which is that you either should be talking about race or you shouldn't be talking about race. And I've done both, where I've written things that are explicitly about race. I think my short story in All These Sunken Souls is a great example, because it is about a creature that takes the form of a Black girl and experiences the prejudices that Black women face. Obviously, it's not a human creature, but it is a creature who is then learning about those prejudices that young Black girls would face in the South at that time. And The Black Veins, which is really just a fantastical comedy where everyone just happens to be Black and brown queer teens of color. And it's about going on a road trip with your friends. It's about fighting monsters, and it's about saving the day and trying to save the people that mean a lot to you. And I think I've experienced both expectations where people say that works that I've written that aren't about race probably should have been. And they're like, well, where was it? Like, why did you not speak about prejudice? Why did you not have your characters be oppressed? And I was like, because that wasn't the tone for the specific book, maybe. But I've also had people have issues with things that I've written that have been about oppression and about prejudice and about overcoming those things. And so I do think that it is a bit difficult in that, like, people will come to your work with their own expectations for what they think you should be doing or what kind of stories they think you should be telling. And I think my advice for any BIPOC writers in that scenario would be, do what you want. Because if it's a scenario where people are going to come to your work and they're always going to have expectations and they're always going to feel a certain way, you want to make sure that you feel happy with what you've written at the end of the day. And so I would always, always, always tell people that if you don't feel comfortable writing about race, if you don't feel comfortable writing about oppression and prejudice, then don't. You don't have to. But if you want to do that, and that is really important to you and it's very meaningful to you, then do it. Because unfortunately, there is no right way to be a BIPOC author. There is only the way that feels right to you. And that would be my number one advice for people who are wondering like what it's like to be in the industry as a BIPOC author. I would say, well, it's rough, but you can always love your work. And that is honestly the most important thing at the end of the day to me.
I think I'll sort of tag on and add that I think that my experience of writing in sort of the contemporary fantasy world is that I especially like sort of writing about like queer and BIPOC characters is that especially for a wider audience, like a I don't want to say mainstream, but for like just general consumption, is that there's some level of where if you're writing genre fiction in like, you know, speculative fiction, you have to world build on two fronts where you're sitting there world building to be like, and they're witches, and this is how their magic works, and this is how the world works. And you're also world building in the sense that you are trying to make legible to a large number of people the experience of how your characters are. And so I feel like the feedback that I got a lot of about my work, which I don't think necessarily it's always that people think about this as a bad thing, though it can be bad feedback. It's like doing a lot, and I'm like, if she was just a white girl wandering around doing magic, no one would be like, book is doing a lot. And I think that that kind of is something that I think that colors the way that people view fantasy and like works that are sort of world building on multiple fronts, because you're like, oh, well, I have a character who has a very specific class experience, has a very specific racial experience, and like is in a very specific place. And they're like, oh, you're doing a lot. You're like doing three things. And I'm like, well, it's just that you don't have as large of a bank of other stories that you can compare this directly to, because you have 85 books about white girls doing magic, but you have 4 books that you can think of that you can compare this to. So you're like, oh, well, I don't immediately understand who this person is. So like, please, author, spend 45 pages making me understand who this is. And now I'm doing a lot in the book. So I feel like, it's one of those things that I just hope will change over time. So then people will be like, well, there's 80 other books that are also about Black girls who are doing witchcraft. So I totally get what this means immediately. But I think that does kind of play into the way that people perceive the work.
Honestly, we just have to jump in real quick and say Terry's face when you were talking about, just the disrespect. Terry's face killed us. Because we knew exactly what you were thinking.
You already know.
We had a telepathic Black person moment. But we would love, please continue. We had to throw that out. That whole thing. Yes. Feel that.
Yeah, so clearly I agree with everything that has been said. But I also want to add to an additional perspective that I believe that queer BIPOC creators and readers view our work, in spite of what everyone outside of our community thinks, I think that we view our own work as like the platinum standard. And we like validate our own quality, right? So like I've gotten to a point now where if a book is not about a person of color, written by a person of color, I'm hard pressed to read it. Like you gotta really convince me, like, why am I reading this book about these white straight people? Like
I finished high school. Why am I doing this again?
Right.
And we've read it already.
I lived it.
Yeah.
You know.
Like there are so many of us that are writing like such really, really good stuff that like I don't want to go back to the mediocre stuff anymore. So I think our stuff is the zhuzh. So
I think too. I'm sorry. Are you done, Terry?
yeah, I'm done. Go ahead.
I agree with you, first of all. And I feel like that's like why I was excited to be here today and like just to celebrate our work and like focus on that and not necessarily through the lens of that exclusively. But I think also in terms of like readers' expectations when they come to us, at least, so if you think of publishing as just kind of like the gatekeepers to our career, what is so frustrating about the expectations they have for us is it is largely about edification, which I think is to serve kind of assuaging their feelings of white guilt. And so when you come to them with something where you're like, oh, this is all Asian characters and they're all murderers. And it's not because I'm talking about something that I culturally inherited. It's because I enjoy slashers. And they're like, I have no idea what to do with you. Whereas if you're a white person, you come with that and they're like, camp, we get it, we love it. And so like my next graphic novel that comes out next year is called The Worst Ronin. And it's like a buddy comedy about samurais who are like femme and like, I don't know, I think it's really fun. It's like murder, monsters, farts, revenge, like all the good stuff. And I purposely gave them cell phones because I was like, fuck it. I'm not here to teach you anything. I'm not doing that. This is not like your primer in Edo era Japan. Like you can go pick up a book if that's what like, you know, go watch a documentary or something if that's what you want. I'm here for a good time. And it was really hard to sell because so many editors were like, this isn't accurate. And I was like, yes, you could tell that because of the monsters and also the cell phones. That was not my interest. And that's not what I'm doing for you. Like, I'm not here to make you a better person. I'm here for a good time. And I like spaces where we are allowed to do that because I think that they are limited, at least in paid places. I should rephrase. I would like to be paid for my imagination in that way.
I'd like that on a mug. I'm not here to make you a good person. I'm here for a good time.
So true. So true.
And you know, I also want to add to like in terms of like the disrespect and like people's expectations of us in our art. How I feel about Blood Debts and Alex Wise is when I wrote those books, I wrote them with a very specific audience in mind. And if I did not write it for you, you can say what you want about it. I don't care. Like, and the people who I wrote it for love it. That's who opinions I care about. So
that's
tell
so
it to
healthy.
That matters, you know?
You know what study I want, and that I don't have the time to do, but I want to see like an actual data chart that breaks down just how Goodreads stars fall for white authors versus authors of color. And I want to have a keyword search for like unrelatable or like unlikable for the
doing too much.
Yeah, doing too much. You know, like
I think the entire industry would explode if we got that information.
I want it so bad. I want it real bad.
Acted too much like a teen, so I hate her.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like y'all talking about this really gave language to a deeply unsettling feeling that we've had and couldn't pinpoint with the verbiage of what they're really saying when they're saying doing too much is that we are too much, that it's too much to be brown and trans and traumatized and adopted and fighting monsters at the same time. We can only have one or two marginalizations. And that comment is, as Aislinn was saying, we believe, always given when you don't explain the character enough. But if you pick up a book as a queer, trans, disabled person of color, you're not going to need all that context because you're like, oh, that's me. I get it. And so it's about the too much comment is who are we being centered and who is too much for whom?
Mm-hmm.
I think you're talking so well about the assumption of like heteronormative and white neutrality, like that those are the base person, like the human, or the is able-bodied and heterosexual and cisgender and white. And anytime somebody is not that, they will get what people show up in Aislinn's Goodreads with, like those kinds of comments, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like we have unpacked that, but do any of y'all have anything else on this topic to expound upon? We said what we had to say. Next question. So, switching gears to something a little more cheerful, how do y'all feed your creative brains in order to write these incredible, fantastical, creepy, mind-bending works?
I go see Across the Spider-Verse 3 times in a row.
Across the universe?
Across the Spider-Verse.
Oh, across the okay. We thought you meant that one movie with it was like based off of the Beatles, and there was that.
Oh my God. I've never heard of that. No.
Painting. It's very
interesting. Like, I'm a Miles Morales stanny. Like I love Miles. No, but in all honesty, I really do.
Who isn't?
Yes, right.
Right.
I really do think that immersing yourself in the works of other people in your community is so important. I think that often it's easy to fall into sort of a isolated feeling that like you are one of the only people in the industry trying to do what you're trying to do. And to be fair, it because of how difficult it is to be published as a queer person of color, because of like the odds stacked against us and the lack of resources, there are a smaller number of us, but we are out there and we are making things and we are working and doing our best. And I think there's something so inspiring about coming across another like book or a graphic novel or a webcomic by another queer person of color and just being so inspired by their work and falling in love with it and really gaining that sense of community. I think, which also extends to panels like this where I get to hear you guys speak and talk about your work and talk about what inspires you. I think that's one of the things that really keeps me going, is knowing that like I am in a community, you know, even as much as other people would like to make it seem like I am not, and that I'm like the only person with my own marginalized identities. It's not true. And there's a whole bunch of us out there. And we are very, very passionate about like magic and monsters and things that are fun and bright and colorful. And I think I love exposing myself to media that reminds me of that and helps me to feel less alone. So for me, I'm a community girl. I'm a found family girl. I love all elements of that.
Preach.
I love consuming content that's like not in my genre, honestly. I think I'm feeling like this because I'm on like a revisions deadline right now. But it's like really hard for me to go and read stuff that's kind of in the similar genre to me while I'm trying to write like my own stuff. So I end up reading like a lot of romance, like just straight romance when I'm like trying to write, or like, honestly, I think my next book is like probably most inspired by like a D&D actual play show that I really liked. So I just like watching things or like consuming things that are not similar to what I'm trying to do, that I'm like, wow, you know what I really love? Like the relationship between these two people and like how funny that was. Or like, I think I'm like, wow, you know, I really want to include like a grumpy sunshine dynamic in my next book because I think that really, you know, feeds my soul. Or I'm like really obsessed with like isekai comics, and that's going to be in there somehow. So I think that kind of stuff is really helpful in like refilling my well, so I don't just feel like a work monster who just reads books in my genre because I must do it to stay up to date. Sometimes, yeah, I mean, I work in books. Sometimes I'm just like, I have to read this, it's my job. Sometimes it's nice to just be like, I'm just reading a fun little book, instead of being like, I gotta sit down and do my capitalism for today. So yeah.
go off.
Sitting down and doing your capitalism.
Yes.
I'll say for me,
Unfortunately, I'm the opposite. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Terry.
I'll be really quick. I'll say for me, it's just video games. I'm a gamer. I love survival horror. I'm playing the Dead Space remake right now. So whenever I need to like recharge, I will go and play for like 30 minutes. I try to make it 30 minutes, but it doesn't ever end up being that. But
Jessica, what about you? How do you refuel your creative brain?
So I am the opposite of Aislinn. I have to do my capitalism every day. So, which is also really funny for me personally because I write horror, but I'm terrified of horror. So I'm so scared of horror movies. I'm just like crying while I'm like doing my research. So typically I try to write. I try to read horror like manga, or I watch horror games with the lights on and like the volume really low, and then like my hand on the pause button in case I need to like stop. But because there's like I think books are less scary than watching horror movies like in a movie theater. So yeah, very scary for me, but I do it. I have to suffer for my craft. But I get inspired by what other people are doing and specifically what they're not. So if I'm reading like a white horror book, I'm like, what was lacking for this for me? And then I take that like a sponge and I kind of like put that away in the back of my brain. And then when it's time for me to write, then I'm able to, okay, here's what I wanted to do. And then here's more. Here's what I was missing. Here's what I feel like the world doesn't have yet. So I have to read in my genre before I write my genre.
Makes sense.
Jessica, I am also a person who writes horror and is terrified of horror. And a thing that I do when I watch the movies is I put them on my laptop, but I don't make it full screen, and I keep something else up at the same time so that I can live.
Not the softies.
Listen, I feel like softies are the best authors of horror because we're the ones who understand why it's scary, right? Like, because we're intimately like in it, we're scared.
Go. Okay, just out of curiosity, what in horror, like what type of horror is the scariest? Is it like slashers, home invasion?
Home invasion is my personal like and Tananarive Due has a great quote that she says that all horror starts in the home, like is in the like belongs in the home. The best horror is there. And ever since I heard her say that, I was like, I have nothing smart to say on this matter. I will just refer to her.
That's us with it. But facts. What about for the rest of y'all? If
Zombies really scare me.
Okay, bet.
I don't know.
I think there's something really horrible about something that looks like you but is not you, and you can't reason with it. I hate that.
Is that Our Father, you mean? I'm sorry, we tried so hard not to make it down. Ours is children, like creepy supernatural children.
Oh, I thought you meant children in general for a second. Just a child. Children, yeah. You just see a child, they're like, oh.
What's funny about that is our dog does not like kids. Like she can't stand children. Like we think she's scared of them. Like she puffs up, so she can't be around children.
That is so funny.
But you said, Terry, there's nothing. Were you saying that there's nothing that gets you?
I don't think so. The only thing that like mildly like scares me is cosmic horror, because like you just can't escape from it. Like no matter what you do, like unless you beat it, like you're doomed. So that's the only thing that's scary.
Zone cosmic? Like Twilight Zone cosmic horror kind of thing?
Or like Lovecraft.
That was our other thought, Lovecraft, yeah.
Like more like Twilight Zone kind of.
Okay, bet.
Okay.
Did you answer, Aislinn? We can't remember.
No, I am a tiny little baby wimp. I can't do. I've watched maybe like one horror movie in my life, and it was Get Out because I tried to do it for the culture, and then I was so scared in the theater that I force slept. Like my brain was it, and I shut down.
Wait, are you sure you didn't pass out? Because it sounds a little more like you might have passed out.
I'm not a doctor, but
Fainted.
I just went to sleep. I don't know. I don't want to read it. I will say I did watch the first 15 minutes of Get Out. And
What did you do with the deer scene as they're driving?
Okay, and then I went to a party where we were walking around outside, and then and it was three of us, and we were all people of color, and then a car started following us down the street, and we were like, we're all gonna die. So honestly, I think it was because all of us had watched Get Out too recently, so we were like, this. So anyway, that's scary to me. Is I think that there's a level of people following you, and that is with nefarious things they want to do that scares me. Also, I used to be a very big Doctor Who fan when I was a teen, on brand. And I really was freaked out by things that move when you're not looking, or
the
things that
angel
are in the
episode.
dark.
I love that.
The episode in the library with the things in the shadows that would eat you. It's that would eat people's whole bodies and take all their the flesh off their bodies. Maybe Doctor Who's the closest I've ever been able to get to horror. Honestly,
That is
now that I'm
horror.
with this.
Doctor Who's awesome because it's just genre, right? It's science fiction, it's fantasy, it's horror. And so those are horror episodes, and you watch them without passing out, and we're all really proud of you.
Thanks. I wasn't able to watch the episode with the gas mask children because maybe actually I think creepy children might be too much for me.
Well, we've never been interested in Doctor Who, and now we want to see that episode. We have to.
I feel like y'all can read an episode list and find what you want. You
Yes.
because otherwise you're oh, I have 40 years of television to watch right now.
Right. Right. That's fair. Yeah, it could never be us.
I'm now trying to think of what genuinely scares me in horror anymore, because I feel like I had the opposite experience to most people on this panel. The first movie I ever remember seeing as a tiny baby was Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow. It's my family loves horror. I grew up with it. I literally just love it. And I now can no longer tell the difference between that's scary and I'm scared, and that's scary and it's exciting. And even now you guys are talking about things you find horrifying, and I'm you're so right. That is horrifying, with this huge smile on my face, like a madman. Literally yes, I love being horrified. And I think the one thing that does get me, that genuinely creeps me out. I'm so glad you brought up Jordan Peele, Aislinn, because it made me remember Nope. And the opening of Nope with the monkey, I won't spoil it in case anyone hasn't seen it, but that I can never rewatch that movie just because of the monkey entirely. I was just something about that unnerved something deep in me, and I can't tell if it's because it's based on a true story or if there's
It is?
yes.
What? Please, Ashley, don't pass out.
Bad day. It's a bad day for all of us.
Oh no, not me. I'm realizing I'm telling this to the people who are I hate horror. I'm oh no. I will leave it up to you to decide how much you want to hear about it, but there are elements of that story that is true. That's all I'll say. And I can't tell if the truth of it all is what gets me, or if it's just the visceral sort of audio magic that they did, because I saw it in the theater and it was disgusting in the best way possible. I was I'm disgusted right now. I'm horrified. This is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. I want to give Jordan Peele all my money. This is visceral. So I don't know. I'm not sure what scares me anymore, because I get a mix of feeling horrified and disgusted, and then also in awe that someone was able to bring that emotion out of me. So can't really tell the difference anymore.
We're obsessed that this just turned into a racialized horror panel. We're gonna switch gears so that we can make sure we have time for audience questions. Are there any mythological creatures or mythos you'd love to write a fantasy or horror? We're just putting it together now. Around.
I really want to answer this question.
What?
Can I go, Terry?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I want to write a shapeshifter book. And I think that maybe is just a gender thing. But I just really want to write about people who can just change what they look like on command. And so that is, I think, probably why that appeals to me so much. But I think that that's super cool and interesting and has a lot of possibility.
What's throwing me, like, in the best way about that is the implications of what a white shape-shifting person could do.
That's also why I want to write about that.
You know, like,
No. Well, because I think, you know, in a world where you can change your appearance,
yes.
I'm not going to get fully on my soapbox about this, but I think what is fascinating to me about it is that if this is like a normal thing, like if you are a shapeshifter person, do you have a race? And I think that's the question is would you have like a default person that you started out looking like, and so you have a set of experiences looking like a certain way. I mean, maybe this is also kind of a mixed race thing as well, but it's about like the way other people perceive you influencing so much the way, and how that can be very different depending on who's perceiving you, and like what that does when someone is a person who's like crafting their own appearance, and whether they have a different experience of like race and gender presentation and an understanding of it when they realize, when it's like so real, like it's so deep in it that they're like, this is kind of a made up thing that people look at me and think very specific things, but like nothing about this is who I am. And like, is it possible for people to be like, for example, like, can you be culturally Black if your like family is just like does not have a race realistically? If you're like, or if your like family is all people who decided that we are shapeshifters who are Black, and so we all consistently look this way, and that's who we are as a people. Anyway, I think that's
Aislinn,
this.
I would actually be so interested to know, like, if there was a shapeshifter family who decided they were all Black, what happens when one of them is like, not me, I'm something else? Like, what do you do? Like, do you just talk to that child and be like, no, you are Black, stay as a Black person, don't shapeshift into anything else? Like, do you
honestly, that's like cisness. Like, you know what we're saying?
Yeah.
Like, no, you're not going to be trans. We all decided we're going to be this. Like, this is what we're.
Yeah,
you know?
I just think that has so much potential. I love that idea. I can't wait.
You have to write it. We will personally fund this project. We'll send you a paycheck every week. Figure a certain word out. Okay.
Tell Penguin, everyone.
Yes. Hell yeah. Petition. We're starting a petition right now. All right, y'all. Who's next? Wait, Terry, right? Terry was gonna go.
Yeah, I want to write about zombies. I'm a huge like zombie nerd, zombie geek. I love zombies. I actually have an idea for a zombie story.
I'm so scared, Terry.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I have an idea for a zombie story set in space that is a villain origin story that I've been like kicking around for a while. But yes.
That sounds out of this world. But thank you.
Nice.
What about you, Maggie?
My favorite one that I've slipped into one of my things recently is I have a short story in Mermaids Don't Drown, which is an anthology that comes out this fall. Actually the same day as my sequel, so big day for me. But and it's a manananggal, which is a Filipino monster that's like a winged creature, and then it can split itself in half from like the belly button down, like it just detaches. And I put it in a very wholesome romance story. That's not a joke. And then, but my like big goal is I really want to write a horror comedy about yokai or yurei, which are like Japanese spirits and ghosts, because they are wild. Like I'm very Japanese American. Like I've gone to Japan twice in my life. Like I don't speak Japanese, you know, and so my relationship to my culture is like kind of distant. And so when I started kind of like scratching the yokai surface, and it was like, oh geez, this is just like spookies all the way down, and they all have like weird shapes. They all have specific names. There's like the hand that comes and bothers you when you get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. There's the lady with like the really long neck who comes in and just like makes scary faces at you. I think it is so ripe for comedy as well as being frightening. I love that so much, because I think that's where I exist the most happily in horror, because like a jump scare and a joke are written like the same way in a lot of ways. Like there's like pacing to horror and comedy that are so similar. Like you build the joke and you build the scare the same exact way, and then which way it falls lets you know if it's a funny moment or a scary moment. And so like Asia was saying, like sometimes it can be hard to tell if you're like scared or delighted. And I think that's where I'm the happiest. So someday I will write a yokai yurei book.
I think a lot. Oh, Jessica, were you about to talk?
No, there's an echo. Did you move your cell phone closer to the?
I might have.
Sometimes that happens.
No.
Oh God. That's horrible.
No, so you're good.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was possible. Weird. But yeah, I think a lot about cryptids personally. I love cryptids. I love the concept of a community just having this creature that is just known for terrorizing them for a long time. I think that there's something so fascinating to me about that. Like, of course, you have your famous cryptids, like your Bigfoot, your Mothman. You know, everybody's in love with them. Everybody wants to marry Mothman. But I am also just so interested in the idea of just that generation after generation, there's just been this thing that's just around. And I think that that has such a really deep like vein to explore sort of like different sort of generational ideas and sort of just generational opinions about like life and experiences with this creature. And like, I love writing about families, both found family and like genetic families. And I'm like imagining a story about a family that just like has had a relationship with a certain sort of cryptid for a number of years because maybe they've lived in this town or this village for as long as they could remember. And I think it gives you a lot to play around with, because sort of like what Maggie was saying, like there's some comedy in there. Like, what do you mean we've been haunted by the same cryptid for like 4 generations? Why haven't we killed it yet? What have we been doing? Like, there's something so funny about that, but there's also something really haunting about the theme of like generational curses that can't be broken. Like, is there something, there is some deeper reason that we can't get rid of this thing? Have we been trying for generations and have we just failed? But also cryptids are just really funny. Like, there's just something so funny about them. And so I would love to either research a specific cryptid in a specific area or come up with my own cryptid to sort of explore. But a lot of those themes just sort of run circles around in my head a lot. And I'm like, gosh, I need to write a cryptid thing. That needs to happen.
It does. Jessica, did you go?
Absolutely. You would love. No, I haven't yet. But you would love Monstrous because it's that idea. Like he would be so there's a giant snake in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, the worst moment for Jessica's internet to cut out.
Because I'm starving. Okay, so like either you feed me or. Oh no, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back now. I was anxious because I was so excited to hear what you were gonna say, and then you disappeared.
Okay. Oh no, I'm sorry. But yeah, he's just like in the woods. He's chilling. It's been 200 years. Everyone's like, bro, we are so sick of the snake. Like, but like, what am I going to do? You know, this way it's always been. So you would love Monstrous.
Yes. I absolutely would
not
have to.
But
like,
for me, I love horror comedy as well. Oh, sorry. My internet cut out. I didn't hear what you said.
No, we didn't say anything. The last thing we heard was I love horror comedy as well. Was that the end of the thought? Or we might have missed something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I have a lag, I think.
Oh, that makes sense. No, it's all good.
Okay, so yes. Yeah. I love horror comedy as well. And so I really want to write about a girl who is like shape-shifting, but like she doesn't know it. So everyone's just like, bro, there's like this like terrible monster in the woods. She's like, oh my God, that's so crazy. Like, but it's her the whole time. And she just like, she sees like bloody footprints in her bathroom. She's like, I'm not worried about it. Like, that's my dog or something. I don't know. Like, I don't have time. I got a lot going on. So I would
Right.
love to write something like that.
Right. That sounds so freaking cool. Please do that. Maggie's face. So the next thing that we would love to ask is, sorry, that sounds so cool. It just threw off our brain. We're like, what? Are there any, wait, no. Do y'all feel that your respective Black and brownnesses informs your fantastical world building? The nods. That if you want to expound upon that, totally cool. And if not, y'all's work speaks for itself as well.
Yeah, for me, I think in Blood Debts, the magic system is steeped in culture, not just for me, but for the characters in the story. Generational magic, which is the magic that Black and brown people in the Blood Debts world practice, was literally given to them during colonization and slavery to help them fight against their oppressors. And a lot of like the story elements and certain things about the magic system and how the different branches work together, and how prominent people from the different branches like struggle for power against each other. A lot of my own personal life experiences have influenced that and how I've built and shaped that story. So definitely, I feel like all the magic I write in some way like is informed by like my identity.
I mean, The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea is like largely my own way of trying to grapple with being like living with the privilege of coming from an empire, basically like American empire. And like, I was really inspired by I lived for like a year and a half out of a Forerunner, and I drove down like the west coast of South America as a continent. And the whole time I was just like really like meditating on colonization and like what it means to be an American visitor to these places where sometimes our government is responsible for the overthrow of their their democracies and things like that. And like seeing these Catholic churches that are built everywhere that look exactly the same, even though you're in Bolivia or you're in Cuba or you're in Chile, like it's wild. And so like coming from that, but also being a person within the empire that I'm from that is not privileged the same way as some of the other people. And so I'm sorry, I feel like this is a very complicated way of saying like, yes, but I also wanted to write about it from a complex enough point of view to address that like you can be both marginalized and privileged at the same time, and that there's all these like intersections and weird ways that these come up against each other, so that when you interact with people in the greater world, you are interacting with people who exist at all these other intersections as well. And like The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea was so much about like falling in love and finding a power dynamic that is functional within that kind of complexity.
I want to make sure that we have enough time for y'all to plug your upcoming works, previous works, anything that you want to center. But we are going to tell the audience that as we are wrapping up, if any of y'all want to throw a question out, we'll pick one and answer it before the panel ends if it's like a super quick one. But let's do roundtable opposite, and would love it if you could start. Aisha, what are you trying to plug?
Sure. So obviously I already spoke about The Black Veins, which is my YA contemporary fantasy comedy novel that is available now. I'm working on the sequel as we speak, so don't worry if you type into the Google search The Black Veins and it says book 2 when, book 2 soon. Book 2, that's when. You can also find me at Lilith's Muse, which is my newsletter on Substack, which I update twice a month, and it is currently my favorite little outlet for writing about nonfiction, because I'm also an essay writer. So if you're interested in writing about and talking about craft or media, go find me over there on Substack. I'm also on Twitter at Ashia Monet, and on Instagram and TikTok at Asia Writes.
Beautiful. Thank you. And for you, Terry.
Yes. So, as I said, you can order Blood Debts now. Alex Wise versus the End of the World is available for pre-order now. It comes out on September 26th. Blood Justice, which is the sequel to Blood Debts, comes out on April 23rd, and it's available now for pre-order. And I'm available on Instagram at Ice Cream Vice Lord and Twitter as TJ Benton-Walker.
Beautiful. Ashlyn.
The paperback of How to Succeed in Witchcraft is coming out in August 15th. So you can pre-order that now in case you love paperback copies of books. It's cheaper than the hardcover. But you can also buy my hardcover. That's also available. And I am at Aislinn Brophy author on TikTok and Instagram, and just at Aislinn Brophy on Twitter.
Beautiful. Maggie.
Did we skip Jessica? Anyway,
Yeah. We did. Jessica. We went the other way. What's up, Jessica? What are you
I thought
doing?
I was just going after Maggie. Like, I was cool. It's fine.
Our brain can't math the math.
It's okay. It's okay. Okay. So I have like a lot. So Bad Witch Burning paperback comes out 12th. I have a rom-com that comes out next year, and then you can buy the kids' books, Meow or Never and Starting from Scratch. They are available now. You can find me on Twitter at jlou100 and Instagram at Jessica Lewis Author.
Beautiful. And it cut out when you were saying when Bad Witch Burning will be released, but we believe it's July 11th of this year, right? In paperback. That's what Google says. So we're pretty sure that's when that releases.
Oh, yes.
Hey,
Sorry,
okay.
my internet's so bad.
It's all good.
Go ahead. Continue. Bad Witch Burning paperback is July 11th. So.
Bet. Okay. Sweet. Maggie.
You can buy The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea or Squad in paperback now. And you could, if you liked Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, pre-order its sequel, The Siren, the Song, and the Spy. It has spotted hyenas and a dragon and a siren who likes to eat people in it. I thought it was really fun. Hope you do too. Oh, and also the anthology Mermaids Don't Drown. Both Mermaids Don't Drown, The Siren, the Song, and the Spy come out also September 26th. So big day for this panel.
Exactly. So we are actually at our time. We are going to get ready for the next panel, but the fun is going to continue. So make sure that those of you who are watching check the next panel. Thank you so much to these incredible authors for, first of all, being in conversation with us and allowing us to share in your space and your energy, and also for writing these revolutionary works that are everything that queer brown folks need. Yeah, that's all I got. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And if you caught it late, you can always watch the playback, you know? All right.
Jessie, thank you so much for moderating us.
Yes, thank you, Jessie.
Thank you.
Of course.